It's Tim Albright with AVNation with an AVNation special celebrating Black History Month and celebrating the accomplishments, the contributions, and the stories of Black individuals in the AV industry. And with me is my very dear friend, Mr. Mike Blackman from Integrated Systems Europe and Integrated Systems Events. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Tim. Well, thanks for inviting me. Always glad to be speaking with you.
Absolutely. And I here's the thing. I've talked with you over the years, and you and I have spoken. I've interviewed you a number of times, and you have a slight accent, so you are not from the U.S.
No,
You're from the UK, and we can talk about.
To tell the truth,
Yes,
I was born in Guyana, South America. It's a little nation that sits below Venezuela and next to Brazil. It belongs to the Caribbean. It's the only Caribbean nation that's not an island. And I was born there. I left there when I was 6 years old, and I moved to London and grew up there. So I see myself as British, but just to add to the confusion, I became a German citizen a few weeks ago. So, but I managed to keep both nationalities.
Well, and being when you were born in Guyana, you were a citizen, and correct me when I get this wrong. You were a citizen of the British Commonwealth.
Correct.
And at some point in the last 50 years or so, the UK kind of grandfathered in folks, and then that's how you became a full-fledged, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but a full-fledged UK citizen.
It's correct. So when I went to the UK, I was what's called a British Commonwealth citizen, and I became naturalized in 1966. I went to England in 64, and in 66 I became naturalized when Guyana became independent. So then I became a full British citizen.
So one of the things is, and you have a different experience, both from obviously being born in Guyana, and growing up in the UK as a person of color. It's still the UK, and again, correct me if I'm wrong on this. You were still still a minority, right? In the United Kingdom. So let's talk about that aspect, and then kind of how you got into AV. Your mother was a principal, what we would call it in the US, yes. A principal, headmaster, I believe is what you call them in the UK. Yep. And so you obviously exposed to education early on, but you still had some challenges, growing up in the UK, being a person of color.
Absolutely. And I mean, I must admit that I was probably sheltered a lot more than other people. And my mother had a lot of foresight. And the one thing she did is, as soon as we arrived, my parents went to the UK a few years earlier to get settled because they thought it'd be easier to settle without us kids, myself and my brother. Yeah. And just to get settled and make sure they've made the right decision, they left myself and my brother with my grandmother. And I didn't see my mother for about 5 years, or 4 years. And then they were settled, they had their jobs, and my father had gone to study again as well. He was a mathematician, and he studied to be a computer analyst. My mother was having a good career, and they sent for us, and we came and moved to the UK. And my mother had the foresight to actually say, look, if we want to be successful, if we want to move on, we have to do something about our Caribbean accent. So we had elocution lessons, and I hated this, elocution lessons and English lessons when you're very young and all your friends are outside playing, and you're sitting at home, learning. But she had goals. She wanted us to be successful. She wanted to actually provide us with the right tools to move on and progress. But it was a time when there were issues in the UK, and I think we were very aware of that. But it wasn't something that there were probably, how can I say it? There were maybe some things that happened in my life where I could say, oh, okay, that's a little bit racist or a little bit, controversial way I'm being dealt with. But I think I was lucky in that the school I went to was quite multinational. The neighborhood I lived in was like that as well. So, but I lived in a part of London where, you know, we were on the borders of areas where maybe it wasn't so prudent to go walking at night.
Did your parents do that intentionally? Like, did they move you guys? And you said they were settled there already when they sent for you. Did
Yeah.
they settle in an area that was multinational, that was multicultural on purpose?
I mean, I actually never ever asked them, but I guess so, because
Mhm.
when we first moved there, we lived with, you know, in my culture, you know, anyone who's an older person who's not necessarily a relative, you still call uncle or auntie,
Okay.
and you know, this is someone we had no blood relationship, but we called her auntie, and it was friends of the family, friends of the family, and we rented the basement of their house to start with, and then we moved to another place where we rented, and then eventually my parents bought a house. So the first two places we lived, you know, it wasn't like I walked out in the street and I was the only black person there. There were, you know, in the area, you know, it was a mixed community. Um, I must admit, when we moved to the place where we had our first house, I think we were quite unique there.
Hmm. Let's take the Blackman of the '60s and '70s as a young man coming through, university and getting into not just AV but also getting into technology. Because one of the things that you and I have talked about before is the fact that you were instrumental early on, especially in Europe, in getting the technology, both from Microsoft and Apple and several others, into the European market. How did you go from Microsoft and Windows into the AV
I,
industry?
by accident.
Just
You
like
know,
everyone else.
actually, yeah, you know, take a few years back, I studied and I wanted to be an accountant. And I took a
Wait,
sabbatical.
whoa. You wanted to be an accountant?
Yeah, would you believe that?
No. I mean, not that you're not good with numbers, don't misunderstand,
Yeah.
but you're the most dynamic accountant I would have ever met.
Well, what happened was I took a gap year, and I traveled across Canada. I spent 3 months, you know, just doing some cool stuff, and I came back, and I had my place at university, and they wrote to me and they said, "Look, it's a 4-year course. It's a sandwich course, and what you should do is write for your so a sandwich course. I don't know how you call it in the US, but you do 1 year out um, as an internship."
Okay.
And they recommended that I actually started writing to actually get my placement from my internship before I start the course. And I wrote over 100 letters, and those are the days where you wrote everything by hand.
Yeah.
And I posted all these and to various companies. And of the 100 letters I wrote, or over 100, I had 10 replies. And of the 10 replies, I had 2 offers. And I started to think, wow, you know, it's this difficult to move on. But I was still thinking, I was committed. And but one of the companies who I'd written to also said, "Look, we don't know if we have a place for you in your internship, but if you'd like some work experience for the next 6 months or so, we'd love to give you that experience." And I thought, why not? And that was Reed International. And I loved the project work. I was in the corporate consolidation department. So this was worldwide headquarters in Piccadilly in London. And we took the accounts from all over the world. They were consolidated into different groups. And then we would get the final consolidated accounts for each group and put them into one set of accounts. And it was all project work, and it was interesting. But then one guy who was in the bookkeeping department, that's general accounts, he was sick and had to be off for about 3 months. And they asked me to go into that department to take his place. And I was struggling every afternoon to keep awake because, you know, it just wasn't challenging. And I suddenly thought, I am not going to spend the next 4 years studying to do this. And so I started looking around and decided I'd drop my course and started writing off for jobs. And I had an offer from the Financial Times. And I went for an interview, and at the end of, they wrote to me after, said, "Oh, we thought you were really good, but we think you're too good for this job." And I thought, well, that's a nice way to say no.
Yeah.
um, but they said, no, we've got another position we'd like to offer you. Would you be interested to come and interview for it? It has a little bit more money. And that sort of said, wow, okay, this is really cool. So I went in, and they had a position in the financial advertising department, and they wanted somebody who understood what tombstones were, and the various different terms. So I started there, and there I was a little bit unique in the Financial Times, but I learned a lot. It was a great experience, but again, it was dead men's shoes for me. You had to wait. I mean, generally, you had to wait for someone to die before you moved up. And after 6 years, I decided that wasn't for me anymore, and I really wanted to sell, and I then went to VNU Publishing and started working on Personal Computer World magazine. That got me into technology, which was really my first foot in that area. And when you grow up in a house where, my father was a computer analyst, my brother was studying computer programming, etc. So, we had the first Commodore PET. We had the first C64. We had those things at home before anybody knew what they were. Yeah. So I had this affinity for it, and loved it working on PCW magazine. And then I got headhunted. Suddenly the phone started ringing, and one of those calls was to go and run the PCW show. And that was my introduction into exhibitions. And I just loved it, working there, launching technology shows. First PCW, which was both business and games computing. And it was funny in those days to actually meet the guys who actually wrote the stuff. The guys who started all these companies like Electronic Arts, and I knew all these people personally, because in those days they were just small 1- and 2-man companies. And then I got headhunted again to come to Germany. I'd launched Macworld Expo, Deck World, quite a few different vertical computing shows. And then I was headhunted to come to Germany for IDG to launch the Macworld Expo all over Europe. And launching the company in Germany, we then launched Windows World for Microsoft. We did Sun World for Sun, and various, we saw niches. You had these mega computer shows like CeBIT, running here, and systems, and nobody thought there was space for anything else in the computer world in Germany. But we saw the niche for these, for Mac, for Sun, etc. And that's what we did, and quite successfully. And then I left them, and I became a consultant, working with firstly with tech companies, and then my love of Harley Davidson dragged me into motorbikes. And running events for Harley Davidson across Europe. But I still had tech, here in my head. And then I started doing some consulting for some companies who were just going onto the internet platform and had no idea what to do. And that was enjoyable. And one day, my old boss, the guy who dragged me to Germany, gave me a call. And he said, "Mike, how are things?" And he'd actually approached me many years before with various offers, and I'd always turned him down. And he was a headhunter now, and he said, "How are things?" And I said, "Well, it was a time when business was down." And I said, "Could be better." He said, "Oh, I've called you at the right time now." And I said, "Okay, what have you got?" And he said, "I've got 3 associations. They want to launch a new show in Europe. Mike, this is tech. This is you. This job is made for you," he said. I said, "Okay, send me the info." And he sent me all the documentation. I went to the websites of CEDIA and Infocom, as it was then, and NSCA. And I was looking and thinking, actually, this does look like fun. This is something I would enjoy. Yeah. And then I was interviewed. Actually, there was a lot of discussion. The 3 executive directors had decided they wanted to do this, and everything was sitting with the lawyers, and the lawyers were toing and froing, and it was taking ages. And I said, okay, you know, I was waiting, and I was then getting some new contracts for my consulting work, and one of them was coming up for renewal. And I thought, you know, I'll probably say yes to renew this, and then they'll call me and say, okay, we want you to start. And so I called, and I'd actually got an invitation to go to the US from my uncle to come for his birthday. So I called and said, look, I'm going to be in the US anyway on this date. If you want me to come up from Atlanta, as it was then, that's going to be a lot easier for all of us. So I immediately got a phone call back saying, yes, please come and see us. And I flew up, spent the day in Fairfax, being interviewed by everybody, and I left, went back to the airport, got a call on my phone saying, Mike, the job's yours. And that was the start.
And that was the start of ISE.
Yeah.
So you obviously, it was 14, 15 years ago, right?
That was, when was that? Wow, I lose track of time. That was March 2003.
Okay. And the first ISE was when?
Was in January 2004.
All right. So yeah, 17, 18 years ago, almost. Yeah. First ISE, you and I talked about this, and you said this, you know, was modest, but it was there, and it was a seed.
It was there. It was, you know, everyone said, look, this has feet. This is something that we believe can develop into what we want. And all of the exhibitors who were there were unanimous about that, and they wanted to give it a chance. They said we'd done the right thing. It wasn't what they needed at that time, but it was a start. And, you know, we got the support of all the exhibitors saying, we want this to go on. We want to build it up. We believe, you know, we need this, and we want to support it.
Yeah.
And that was a great vote of confidence from everybody. I mean, it was a struggle to get it started. We had, at that time, there were a couple of shows in Germany that covered AV or tried to, and most of the community here were really against, they weren't supporting the show. I can recall one company, they're actually an exhibitor now, and he wrote a letter to me saying, you're only going to get Swiss farmers and, you know, people like that coming to this show. We're not going to support it. And yeah.
But the Swiss farmers, the first show was in Geneva,
correct, yes.
Switzerland, right? Obviously, since then, you guys have you didn't bounce around much. I mean, you Amsterdam, Brussels, and then this year Barcelona.
Yeah, and it was strange because we, you know, Geneva was a good start. It was just not. It was, you know, Geneva's in Europe, but it's not in the EU. So everyone had to import and export. And that was a big, for, you know, for the Americans, it wasn't a problem. They had to do it anyway. But for everybody else in the rest of Europe, they complained about having to do all that paperwork.
Yeah.
So, you know, we went back and said, okay, Geneva's a challenge. We need somewhere. And we went around Europe, it was myself and Jason McGraw. We went to all the various venues over a couple of weeks and met with everybody. And we came back and said, Amsterdam. And we had an option to go to Amsterdam the following year. And it really took off. The trouble was that the year afterwards, we couldn't get the venue. We couldn't get Amsterdam. So we chose Brussels for two reasons. One was it wasn't far away. And secondly, we were struggling with the French-speaking audience, getting them to the show. And we felt a little step in Brussels could help us to build on that audience as well. And it did. And then we came back to Amsterdam, and we stayed there until now.
Yeah. Walk me through, and you pick whichever starting point you want, but walk me through from, you know, Financial Times all the way through to, you know, the early days of ISE, and even the last few years. I have no doubt that you faced challenges, right? Yeah. And financial challenges, but also, you know, challenges, you know, cultural challenges and race related challenges. What sort of challenges did you face, and how did you overcome those?
You know, one of the things I think, and, you know, I put a lot down to my mother and what she showed us, and the way she brought us up. You know, they realized that education was the door opener. And both my parents said very clearly, as long as we're studying, they will financially support us and make that happen. But and that's what we did. And they did everything to help and make sure we had a good start. And the Financial Times it was a great place to be. I think it was quite an open environment in terms of, it certainly wasn't a racist organization in any way. They were very open, but you did notice the little things that maybe there were some opportunities that weren't there for me. And after a while, you wonder, is that because of your color or is that because of your capabilities? And my mother brought me up to be to always be confident about myself. And, after a while, you suddenly realize, okay, if there's no opportunity for me here, then I will find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's why I moved on from the Financial Times, because the long-term future wasn't there for me. But I'll tell you, I had a great time there. I learned a lot, and it put a lot of credit on my CV, having that there as well. And the people I got to know while I was there was fantastic. I had some very, very good managers while I was there, and I enjoyed the time. I still have a few friends there that we stay in touch, one or two people, but most have moved to different places. But then, I moved on, and I think the next job I went to was at VNU, where everything was about your capabilities. Everything, I went into sales there, and, they didn't care what color you were or where you came from. They just wanted you to sell and be successful and deliver. And as long as you did that, you were the king. And the good thing from that place as well was that everybody from outside looking for good salespeople used it as their hunting ground. It took a year and a half, and then suddenly click, the phones, I'd be there late evenings and my phone would ring. And first thing, and it'd be headhunters. And I was always shocked. How do you know who I am? Where do you have my number from? And all these sort of things. And but they seem to have their ways, and it just became somewhere where you didn't care afterwards. It was a case of saying, you've delivered, you've shown what you can do. And yeah, it was a great place to learn about advertising sales and getting in the limelight.
Talk to someone who, talk to an AV professional, talk to a tech, talk to, a salesperson, who may be going through some of these things, right? Who may be, having some sort of a bias. What sort of advice would you give them as they work through, those struggles and those hurdles?
I mean, first thing, I think that in most countries across Europe now, that bias doesn't exist as much as it did before. I think at the end of the day, if you're confident about yourself, then people will get confidence in you, and they'll look past color. If you're in the right organization, if they don't look past color, you're in the wrong organization. And there's, my advice to anybody, if you find that as a problem in the organization you're in and you can't change it, then change yourself, because, it doesn't make any sense to, if the higher up the management level is actually supporting something like that, then, you have no future there. And you're better off finding something where you are, where you have a future, where you have the right sort of people around you. And there are plenty of companies like that in our business. I'd say the opposite is very much the exception. I feel very fortunate to be in the organization I'm in. Having both CEDIA and AVIXA, but particularly guys like Dave Labuscus, who support every opportunity, for diversity, etc. And this just makes a difference. And I think when you seek out organizations like that, then you have a great future.
Talk for a second, because about your organization, though. AVIXA and CEDIA both co-own integrated systems, but you're kind of the guy who put it together.
Yes.
You're the one who you were employee number one, and you can correct me on that if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And you kind of built your team in the last 15, 16, 18 years.
Yeah.
How did you do it with, to create such a diverse workforce? Because you do. I mean, you quite frankly, you have, from a gender standpoint as well as a race standpoint, you have a very diverse workforce. How did you do that?
Our workforce, it hasn't been done purposely. We've just looked for the right people. Now, when we started, I actually headhunted people who I chose. The first few people we actually chose and brought them in. We have in each place also started programs for trainees and have actually been able to recruit people in that way as well. So there's been no focused effort to have such a diverse group. And if we look at it, I think we actually have more women than men in our organization. We have, I think, 7 or 8 different nationalities in the organization. We have gay people. It's really mixed, and it's something I always have to think about. Who's in there, because we don't think like that. We think about, we're a team, and everybody is there to actually do their job and be part of that team and support the rest of the team, and that's how we do it. We're small enough that we can manage like that. And sometimes it's almost like a family. There are rows and disagreements sometimes, but we all come together and we all hug each other and say, okay, we got to do this now. We're all together, and that's how we manage it. And it works for us. But I say we've never gone out and say, oh, we need another black guy, we need another woman, we need a gay guy, or we need whatever, just to be diverse. It's just happened because we've found people who we've looked at their skills, we've looked at what they can do, and said they're right for the job we have.
All right, there we go. That'll be a good place to stop. Mike Blackman, Managing Director of ISE. Thank you, sir. How do people connect with you or Integrated Systems?
So you can get me at mblackman, written together, at iseurope.org. So iseurope.org. I'm on Twitter at ISE_Mike. Or you'll find me on LinkedIn. Just Google me.
All right, very good. Mike Blackman from ISE. Thank you, sir. For us, for AVNation, go by our website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. You'll find this program and a host of others, including the rest of our interviews for Black History Month. All that and more at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.